This episode, so to speak, for your electronic instruction for the fun pouch takes us to step 6 in the written directions. And we're going to identify the floss colors that we're going to use and then pick the coral color to stitch the fun from the very beginning and talk about the steps for peeling floss. I'll explain that, threading a needle, creating a knot, and that will prepare us to be ready to stitch. So what you see on the table here is the finished project. We'll be working on fun, which is the coral color fabric. We'll be working with coral color floss for the first part. If you opted for the floss and notions kit, here's the floss. So I'm going to take that away. And then these are the colors that we're going to work on for the fun pouch. Now again, if you opt to purchase the thread kit, it's got some extra colors. If you want to use them in your fun pouch, by all means use them. It is not a problem. So whatever makes you happy. So as I said, we're going to start with the coral color. These are DMC color variations threads. If you're not familiar with DMC floss, it is from France. It is great colors. This happens to be the color variation one that I think they're just about ready to not keep anymore, which I find very unfortunate. When I hand dye wools, especially in these bright tones, these threads match what I do perfectly. So you might, if you get the thread kit, be sure to kind of safeguard these. Use them judiciously, which means don't waste them, and hang on to them because you never know when you're going to want them again. I use lots of different kinds of threads in my projects, but again, half the time when I'm working with brights, these are really the absolute best colors. So this one is 4200. You see that down here. There's a SKU for where you purchase it, and then this is the number of the floss, 4200. So that's the one that we're going to start with. I'm going to put that over here. So the first dilemma is, what do I pull? And it's a really good question. There's a short one over here, and there's a longer one here. Longer of the two threads, when it's manufactured, is the one that you want to pull. I've suggested in your directions that you need to pull somewhere between 18 and 22 inches. For some stitchers that are extremely experienced, they may think that's a little short. I'm going to ask you to start at about 18 to 22 inches, and as you get more and more confident, if your thread is not tangling or knotting unexpectedly, then the next time you cut it, maybe move up to 22 inches or 24 inches. But be careful about going over long. As you stitch, what you may not be realizing is as you stitch through the fabric, each time you go through fabric, in this case the wool, it's rubbing on the thread, and we call that abrate or abrasion. And over time, if your thread is too long, by the time you get to the very end, you will find that you have just about worn that thread out. So better to go with the correct length of thread and not waste any. So I figured out that 2 lengths this way on my placemat is the length I want, about 22 inches. So that's what I'm going to pull. So here's one. I'm going to fold it down here, and I'm going to come back up to there, and I just happen to know that that's my 22 inches. I tend to leave a couple of inches down here to remind me that when I need more floss, I'm pulling from this long end. So remember to remove it from the skein. This is called a skein. I pull from the long end that was left for me by DMC when it was manufactured. The other thing that I like to do that I want to show you is each time you cut your threads, I'm going to ask you not to cross cut it like a cross, not straight. I'm going to literally ask you to cut it at an angle. And that may seem odd, but it helps in the threading. So here I go, cutting it at least a 45-degree angle, and snip that. I'm going to set this up here. Hopefully it still stays in the field where you can see it and see what color we're working with. What I have now is one length of 22 inches of 6-strand floss. And that's how floss comes. When the word floss is related to your threads, it means that you can stitch with individual threads in this thread, this big thread. This one happens to have 6 strands, and what I ask you to do is kind of pinch it about 1/4 of an inch up and just kind of push down on it and let it fan out like a, like a scary tail on a cat. That way I can identify individual flosses. Now, you may have been taught differently, but through trial and error and working with students, I definitely have returned to what is the correct way to do it. So remember I said, not always hard and fast rules, but when it comes to peeling this floss, I'm going to encourage you to do it the following way. And that is that you identify that there's 6 and you pull just one at a time. So I'm going to just kind of tap on this and get myself one strand of the 6. There it is. I'm going to pinch it fairly tightly between my thumb and index finger on my left hand, and I'm just going to pull. And you'll see it's coiling up under here. Don't let go. Just keep pulling. Watch it coil up under there. I'm pulling one strand out. I'm trying to keep the tail kind of facing me as we go, as it coils up. And look, once it's free, it uncoils. There's my one strand. I'm going to encourage you, it's longer than my field of vision, but I'm going to encourage you to lay it out flat wherever you're working. I'm going to bring it in just a bit so make sure that you can see. Then I'm going to tap it again. I should have 5 strands left, and I'm going to pull one more. So for stitching our motifs, I'm going to pull a total of 2 strands each time. Okay, so there I've got 4 left on here. And I've got my second one here. Now, I'm going to encourage you to lay these 2 out in exactly the same order, meaning I pulled it from the top, my top is over here. I'm going to connect the 2 tops or lay the 2 together at the top. Some instructions working with floss actually encourage you to alter it, so lay one this way and lay the other one opposite. I think you can guess why I'm not switching the direction. This is variegated floss. Let me lay it out again so maybe you can see. It's got real distinct color changes. It goes from kind of a salmon color to a red-orange color to a coral color, back to the salmon color. The beauty of this particular floss is that these variations are random. And random is the key, because if you have the old style floss, when you stitch with it, you get an inch of this color, and then you get an inch of this color, and then you get an inch of this color. In some projects that might be okay. In this particular one, we want the variation in the color, the variegated part, to just show different highlight colors across the motif as we stitch it. So I've got my first 2 here. Now, since I'm here, I'm going to repeat all that and do that again, because I want to end up, since there's 6 strands in the original floss, I'm going to end up with 3 sets of 2. Now I've got 1 set of 2 and 1 set of 4. So now I want to do that all again. So pinch it with about 1/4 of an inch displaying, and then pull 1 strand from those 4. Just kind of sneak in there and get it. And I'm going to hold it more like this so you can see the 4 strands will kind of coil up under my thumb and index finger, no problem. I'm just going to keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and look, it unfurls. I'm going to get that out of the way so that I don't have a problem. I'm going to lay the next one down for my second set of 2. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to pull from the same end. I'm going to find that I've got 3 left. I'm going to pull 1, last one from this bunch of 3, lay it down, matching it to its mate over here, And then with this particular one, it already has two. You just go through and smooth it like that. Now I don't have it here, but I'm going to give you a little plastic bobbin. Sorry, I don't have that to show you. It's flat, it's two-dimensional like paper, but it's plastic, and it'll be something for you to coil your threads on. I'm going to use this one today, but these two I need to secure so I don't lose them and mess them up. So when I don't have access to one of those bobbins to put it on, I'll take 2 fingers in my right hand. If you're left-handed, you do it opposite. Kind of pinch it with my thumb and then just gently smooth those 2 threads together and wrap it around until I have a circular coil that looks like that. And then I'm going to pick up the next one that I'm not quite ready for, put it down on my 2 fingers, hold it with my thumb, wrap it around. You don't have to pull it too tight, but tight enough that it's flat, and set that aside. So we've gone from floss in a skein to 6 strands when we cut it at 22 inches to 3 sets of 2 strands or threads of floss each. So I'm going to just kind of leave those there, and I'm going to pick up this one. Again, smooth that together. You're going to want to smooth it on out, and I'm going to start up here. Now this was my factory cut end, and it's a little furry or fuzzy. I'm going to take my scissors, I cut that end, but this end hasn't been cut, and I'm just going to do that same thing. I'm going to give it not a straight cut, but a diagonal cut, so I've got fresh new ends to work with. You'll find that's helpful when you're threading your needle. Okay, so in your floss and notions kit, you will have received a chenille needle, and I'm going to do my best to show it. Hopefully you can see on my hand. They're not super long. An embroidery needle is longer, but the beauty of a chenille needle is they're pretty sharp. That's one thing. And the second is that they've got an elongated, that means a longer eye. And it's the longer eye that helps you thread it the easiest. So that's what we're doing here. So I've got my needle. I know it's good. Hopefully you've either had some of your own or you've purchased them with the floss and notions kit. I'm going to hold, again, about 1/4 inch of thread going. Now, most people say bring the eye to the thread. I'm not so good at that for some reason, but if that's your method, my job, especially when it comes to needles, threading, and knots, don't unlearn something you learned if it works for you. Now, I will find that that's what it does. Those two kind of want to split away from each other. Now, you can try and hold them up a little bit closer, which might do it, but they just kind of want to separate. So, in our time of sheltering in place, because it's yours and you're doing it, I'm going to do a bad thing, and I'm going to just kind of dampen it a little bit. If you don't want to use your own saliva, no problem. Just have kind of a slightly damp cloth around where you can touch it, moisten it, and make those two behave as one. And that, I hope, will work for me. Part of it is sometimes seeing. Now, if you have trouble threading a particular side of this needle, here's my elongated portion, here's one side, I'm going to flip that sucker all the way around. And so that's what I'm going to do next and try there. So I'm missing it, and actually I think it's the glasses. I must have the wrong ones. But, so let me take out a field here and do that again. So I hope this is the only frustrating part of the kit, but you'll get better and better at threading your needle. I think I got one thread, but not two. Oh my. You know, sometimes it's golden and sometimes it's not. Probably the fact that I'm on camera doesn't help. Let me just keep trying. I think it's the glasses. I'm missing it about every time. Finally, I got it. So once you've got your thread through the needle, and inside your kit, there will be a needle threader. You may or may not need to use it, and that is a-okay. Find what works best for you. Let me go back to the needle. Notice that I said, if you're having a hard time threading one side of the needle, flip it over. The reason for that is they are punched almost like the die cuts that I cut out, where they've got a metal machine that comes straight down and punches the eye out of that rod of metal. One side is way smoother than the other. Now, we don't notice that. It looks perfect from our vantage point, but if you were able to look at that needle under a microscope, you would see that one side is just microscopically rougher than the other. So again, if you're having trouble threading a needle, simply flip it over to the other side and you may find that it goes through smoother. I'm going to take my 2 strands of floss and I'm going to pull away, probably about 10 inches or so. And I'm starting with 22. That might be too long, but we'll see that in a second. And I'm just going to let that drop. So this is the kind of threading that I'm going to do, where I've got a loose one and then I've got an end here where I'm going to place a knot. Okay, so there you go. And then it's time for a knot. Now, the best knot to use is actually a quilter's knot, and it's a funny story, but I didn't know this knot, and I learned to sew in high school. I worked as a parapro, which means I helped as a lab aide in my high school sewing room, sewing lab. When I was in college, I took classes in college. I have a degree in home economics and consumer science, and I never learned how to do this knot. How funny is that? But guess who taught me? A student, a Girl Scout actually. How fantastic is that? So I'm holding the needle between my thumb and index finger in my right hand. Again, it's going to be opposite for you if you're left-handed. And what you can do if you're left-handed is screenshot this part of the video, flip it in your editing software on your smartphone or computer so that you're seeing left hand, right hand, the opposite way. Okay, so I've got, and then my left hand again, index, I've got my thread. I'm going to make a sandwich in my right hand. I've got my index finger on the bottom. I've got my needle on top of my index finger. I'm going to put the thread across my needle like a cross, and I'm going to pinch all that together in my right hand. So it was index finger, needle, thread on top of that, parallel to my finger, perpendicular to the needle, and then I've got my thumb. Then I'm going to take this, I'm going to leave it like this so you can see. Not this end that's doubled, but this end over here that is facing to the left. I'm going to take this and I'm going to wrap it 2 to 5 times. I'll be honest with you, 5 times seems like overkill for me. I'm usually happy with 2 times, so I'm going to use 2 or 3 in the video simulation. So I'm going to wrap it, and I'm going underneath the needle and then clockwise around each time. So 1, 2, let's do 3. I'm going to slide that down, and now I'm pinching my wrap. So I have index finger, needle, the original thread, my thumb. I've wrapped it 3 times. I've pulled this towards my belly to make that little wrapped part disappear under my index and finger and thumb. And then I'm going to pull my needle. So you got to let up a little, let up on tension, tiny bit between your thumb and your index finger, such that you can grab the needle and it's going to slide through seamlessly. Pull, 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 pull. And I say pull to the sky, pull to the sky, pull to the sky, pull to the sky. And then I feel the knot now just under my fingernail or at my index finger and thumb. So I'm going to lay my needle down and I'm going to pick this up, and there she is. That I would consider a clean knot. Now you'll get better and better at how much you've left over here to your right. Don't worry about that. If it's too long, we'll trim it back to about 1/4 inch, but I don't trim it super close. We never want the opportunity for that knot to come undone. So there's your first threaded needle. If you haven't done this before, or if you'd like to learn a new method, you're going to need to stop the video, take it back, rewind it, so to speak, with your, usually if it's on your smartphone or whatever, or your cursor, take it back and watch it again. But at this point, I am ready to stitch. I'm going to stop the camera and make sure that all came through well, and I'll meet you back up with stitching on your fun pouch.